When it comes to Michigan quarterback Bryce Underwood, there are a lot of people who say, well, he's a freshman. You just got to manage your expectations. But there is a lot of things that have kind of continued to be said in press conferences, behind the scenes, and things that make me go, maybe our expectations are too low. Let's get into it on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Thank you to all of you who make us your first listen, and thank you to our everydayers out there. We do appreciate it. First, I want to get into some Bryce Underwood stuff, some interesting tidbits, different things that have been said by different people and the coaching staff or players. And then I want to get a little bit into the wide receivers because we've heard a little bit more about some of those guys that could be getting into the mix. And then finally, I want to get a couple different things, some tidbits in, but really primarily I want to talk about offensive line. So we're kind of mostly staying on offense here. But let's get right into the Bryce Underwood of it all. And if you haven't checked out the Thursday episode with Jack Tuttle, the first one that we're doing, because we're going to be going all season long, I highly recommend that you check that out and hear what he had to say about Bryce. And you know, he's talking about how he saw all these different guys, same recruiting classes, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, all those types of guys, 2018. And, and even like having played with JJ McCarthy, Bryce is right up there with all of them. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to sit there and say, well, what do you expect him to say? Which is one of the dumbest things ever. But I would say that Jack was being relatively tame on camera compared to the pre-interview. So there's that. And then you get like a lot of the different things that you hear, whether it's on the record or off the record. Now, on the record, weirdly, like they are underselling a lot. And I'm not saying that Bryce cannot and will not make mistakes and show, the fact that he's a freshman. But you got everyone out there who's basically telling you like, listen, he ain't a 17-year-old. I mean, he is, but he's not in terms of the way that he carries himself, how mature he is, commands the huddle. Like those are things that take some time generally, right? Like, and I would say that even Michigan's had some guys over the years since I've covered the team that just, either had a poor command, poor leadership, were just like, I was gonna say just another guy, but like I also want to, I'm going to credit Steve Dace on this because it was based off of a conversation he and I had late in the week last week about how like that's kind of what Bryce needs to be, is just another guy. Sorry if I'm stealing your thunder, Steve, because I'm sure you're going to talk about that on tomorrow's show. But that is, part of kind of what we've said is that he needs to just manage the offense. Talking about 2021 Cade McNamara, that's kind of what you want from Bryce. But when you get all these people talking about the leadership, you get people saying like, yeah, he could be as good as Trevor Lawrence, maybe better. I've heard that from multiple people who have seen him regularly. Pre-Michigan, post-Michigan, or during Michigan, whatever. Like it's something that I have heard quite often. So I think that kind of changes a little bit of the calculus about what you can do with him. Now, he still doesn't know what he doesn't know, which is a problem. But he's also insanely talented and gifted in ways that Michigan has never had. I'm not talking about like rarely had. I'm talking never. He is the best raw out of high school player Michigan's ever gotten. Case in point, Giovanni El-Hadi asked, like, what's your favorite, off the field Bryce Underwood story? He says, watching him throw it left-handed. And talking about that, it's not like a situation where he's like, yeah, no, it was fun. He was doing good. He says he can do it just as well as he can right-handed. And I've already seen some of the rivals out there on social media being like, that's not a compliment. It's like, okay, he's the number one player in the country. Do you think he's like really like, yeah, he can't really throw it right-handed, and turns out that left-handed looks the same. Do you think that's what he was saying? Really? Like the things that y'all go to for digs is it's mind-blowingly hilarious. You realize that, right? You can admit that like he's going to be really good. We can do that all the time. Like I think Tavian St. Clair is going to be really, really good. Julian Sand probably going to be pretty good. I don't know. That was kind of a weak quarterback class. Hasn't exactly lit it up yet. So I don't know. But like, I can sit there and say like, Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Smith, those are really good players. For some reason, you can't seem to do that about Michigan. I digress. Anyhow, but I just think that when you hear about, the fact that he has those freakish athletic skills, you hear about the fact that he's got leadership capabilities. There's certain things that he can do. And this is one of the things maybe we'll talk about with Jack this week, that it takes an elder statesman to be able to do it. Like, so Donaven McCulley today spoke about his poise. Remember, Donaven McCulley was a quarterback once upon a time. So he knows how to look at a quarterback and be like, yeah, he's got it, or no, he doesn't. And he's talking about his poise. Like he can stand in the pocket and he's going to take a hit and still, deliver a strike. You got Giovanni El-Hadi praising his leadership in the huddle. He's loud. He has command, commands respect, things of that nature. Those are pieces of the puzzle that you have to understand, take a little bit of getting used to. Then you add in other parts of it, and this is kind of where we're eventually going to go with the wide receivers, new offensive coordinator, which I just don't I just think that that's not getting spoken of nearly enough, is the changeover, right? Like, obviously, like you've seen times where Michigan hasn't been as good at a position and they change over and they're great. Like you look at 2017 offensive line to 2018, going Tim Drevno to Ed Warner. And then the same thing, 2020 offensive line to 2021, Ed Warner to Sherrone Moore. Sometimes those things like change is good. For Michigan's offense, it's definitely good, not me. So I think that that's a big thing. But I think that offensively, like Michigan's got a lot more in its arsenal than you would think. And Bryce Underwood is the start of that. Like I said, he doesn't know what he doesn't know. There's things he's going to learn on the fly. The fact that, again, Michigan only is playing 3 teams that had winning record last year. They only have, with the preseason coaches poll that just came out, Michigan's 14th. The only other team on that Michigan has on the schedule that is currently ranked is Ohio State at number 2. That may change depending on what happens when they play number 1 Texas in week 1. So like there's a lot where you look at it and say like, okay, is he playing a murderer's row? I don't think he is. Oklahoma's defense is going to be tough. I'm more afraid of Nebraska's offense with Dylan Raiola, Dana Holgerson. I'm not as afraid of their defense. And the same thing would be said of like Ohio State, except for, Caleb Downs. And they've got some good players back there, but like it's a Matt Patricia defense. If you're a Detroit Lions fan and have been for any point in time, yeah, you're probably not as afraid of that. So there's a lot working in Bryce's favor. And I'm excited to see how that's going to work out. All right, let's get to the wide receivers because that's where I still have my concerns. But there are some names that I think are worth kind of looking out for, and we're going to get to those here in just a moment. But before we do, time to fuel up and churn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or even off of it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and hydrated. I remember the best hole I ever played. I know I mentioned last week the Moose Ridge, I think, one, but I played at Highland Hills Golf Course. It's kind of a little rinky-dink course in Highland, Michigan, and they've got a par 5 there. And I was just on it once, and I hit a drive so far, and then after that, I hit off of my 3-wood so far. It landed. I was like, "Where'd the ball go?" It was on the green, a foot from the hole. I eagled for the first and only time in my I don't want to call it a golf career. It's not one. Golf boondoggle. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk wide receiving core. That's my big concern with this team. It's not quarterback, not back, not tight end. It's still wide receiving core. Now, I think it's interesting because I think in some ways we are underselling Donaven McCulley. The number one, he said like that he had to earn it and still has to continue to earn it. But it was because he said I've always been number one wherever I've gone as far as the number, and I wanted it, but they said, we're starting you off at 13. You got to earn it. He did. He earned it. And, his goal is to get 1,000 yards or more, he said today. So I think that's well within reason. But outside of that, there's question marks, right? We haven't seen it. We've seen glimpses from Samaj Moore. It hasn't been consistent. Trust me, more than anything, want him to succeed. I want him to be the number one. I want a 24-hour cam reality show that follows him around. We've been very open and honest about that. He is entertainment incorporated. He is going to have his own show someday, but I want him to see more from him, right? We need to see more from him, more consistent. Now, the way he talked about how he was used by Kirk Campbell versus Chip Lindsey, we'll see if that makes a big difference. He says he's not going to be a bubble screen guy now. Okay, I want to see it. But the name that I think, and I got yelled at by some of y'all at one point because when I was doing my way too early depth chart back in spring ball, I had slotted in Anthony Simpson. And some of you were not fans of that. Some of you were like, you're sleeping on Samaj. No, I think you're sleeping on Anthony Simpson. This is a guy that had almost 800 yards at UMass. And I know there's a lot of you that roll your eyes and you say, oh, but UMass. It's UMass. Worst FBS team. A lot of the time. Okay. I mean, that's fair, but he's had time against Power 5 opponents, right? He was at Arizona under Jed Fish before going to UMass. And UMass is usually playing teams that are better than them. Right? So that for him to get, almost 800 yards, it's the most prolific receiver Michigan's getting. And then just to hear Donaven McCulley talk about his speed and he's obviously it's only been a few days, right, of fall camp. He wasn't around for spring ball. But I've heard from other people that people might be sleeping on this guy. I would not be surprised if he is a household name by the end of it. The other name that I think that you should pay more attention to is Andrew Marsh, because we all kind of that's what we all kind of thought. And again, the same caution that we always give about the freshman wide receivers, but he was the hot name as a recruit, and then Jamar Browder burst onto the scene, and he became the hype of spring ball. And then from there, it became it's going to be Jamar Browder. And I'm just being told, look out for Andrew Marsh. He's the real deal. He's going to be a guy that you really just need to keep your eye on, okay? So I think that is going to be interesting to watch. But outside of that, we've talked about Kendrick Bell. I think that, and we talked about him last week even. I think that he'll be interesting now that he's healthy. He's got a year of being a wide receiver, making the same transition as McCulley did, right? Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get acclimated. I think McCulley probably had a little time on task, and he's just so athletic, but never count out a Bell. One other thing, and this isn't camp intel, this is just me just kind of having looked at the roster and just wondering. CJ Charleston, who was really good at Youngstown State, was really good, but then only had 2 catches, I think, last year. It was pretty good blocking, which you have to remember. You're only going to see the field if you're an adequate blocker at Michigan, because they're not trying to tip their hat that way. So you've got to be able to do it. But CJ Charleston, who also could be in that mix, right? Had some injury issues coming on. Had a nice catch. I think it was in week 3 last year. And then we just kind of didn't hear from him again. I'd be curious to see, because like I didn't, like he was one of those names that didn't really feel like asking anybody. Like, is he still a part of this? It's kind of like Ricky Johnson, who I think still had another year of eligibility left. Like, is he going to be back at corner? And it turns out he's not on the roster. No. So like that's interesting. I want to keep my eye on him, but really though, it's going to all start with Donaven McCulley. Like if he is out there doing, and listen, by every account that I've heard who's been able to see him play in spring and all of that, like behind the scenes, it's been like, no, this dude is the real deal. Like he there's a reason why Sharon Moore keeps on comparing him to Nico Collins, right? He's not doing it in this just like Buckeyes like to try to do with the whole, that's not a compliment type of thing, right? Like, he's not saying that in Nico Collins being behind Ronnie Bell type of thing. He's saying like, he's a guy that can go up and get it. He's a guy that can do some things for us. So I think it starts with him, but I'm really curious with like Anthony Simpson, right? They didn't bring him in just to sit on the bench. This is, I believe, his final opportunity here. He might have redshirted first year, so he might have 2 years, but just the fact that like, I just think that we're underselling what this guy can do. And when you're playing at a place like UMass, you're not going to get a lot of attention. And Michigan, the last time Michigan nabbed a guy from UMass, worked out pretty well with Josh Wallow. I'm interested to see what's there. All right. I'm a little afraid because I just saw the little lag on the audio, which usually spells doom. Yep. We're in doom territory. I even restarted the program. Adobe Audition, get stuff together. All right, we're going to continue on. We've got more to get to. A couple little tidbits we're going to get to here in just a moment. But before we do, we've all been there logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with this of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets easier and faster than ever before. Prices you drop as it gets closer to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last minute deals. Listen, sometimes I'm tired of the endless scrolling to find the best deal. The great thing is Gametime's Zone Deals picks the best seats in your section for you. If you ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy, the app shows you a panoramic view, so there's absolutely no surprises. With Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. If you're worried about what happens if your plans change, guess what? The Gametime guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. So, yeah, sorry, quick pause. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. To some degree, I need an assistant to handle some of the tech stuff, especially with the rooms all spread out. I'm not just sitting at a computer anymore, as you can see. If you are watching, if you're listening, then tough luck. Rely on your imagination. All right, offensive line. Giovanni El-Hadi talked about how last year was unacceptable. I listen. I know, like that. What else are they going to say? That one's a little fair. But like he's talking about how he gained weight and like he felt like he was getting pushed around a little bit, and now he's harder to push around. Says like last year defense and practice was getting the better of them a lot of the times, and now they're starting to it's pretty much equal. It's an iron sharpens iron situation. So like I think that there's a lot to like. Talking about Andrew Sprague, like that dude's unreal. Talking about Andrew Babalola, and I'm still torn, right? Like I came out here and gave a full-throated defense of Evan Link, but I after talking to a couple more people, more so colleagues than anything, I'm by the hype and say like I'm not going to write off the idea that this guy could be a starter in year one. I think it's implausible, but I'm not going to write it off. But I do think like the offensive line, especially because we're hearing today from first it was TJ Guy. Asked him what coach is outside of Lou like the loudest? Who's getting after guys the most? Who do you hear bellowing the most? And he's like, oh, it's Juan Castillo. I think that's interesting in and of itself, just by view of he's like, he's an assistant offensive line coach. He's an assistant to the offensive line coach. So, but I think, one thing is interesting. Time on task for Grant Newsome. Last year was just, he went from tight ends, which, that tends to be a place where, you stick the offensive coach who isn't necessarily a coordinator. I mean, I know Steve Kasula's been coordinator before, but I mean, that tends to be like hey, we want you to grow here. That tends to be where you stick a guy. That's where Grant Newsome started. And I don't think that's an accident. And then, it was a little rocky start for the first year, but then you got Juan Castillo, who Giovanni Elhadi says is always in the building. Always. Like, he's like, he lives here, basically. So now they're getting veteran NFL coaching, number one. Number two, I think, players are allowed to get better. And I think that there's a lot where you can look at it and say, I think we're probably going to see some of those guys that struggled last year get better. And number three, I think getting more experience across the board, coaches as well as players, I think it's going to bode well. I feel better personally about the offensive line than I do wide receiver, but those are the two that are kind of at the bottom of my list right now, along with cornerback depth. That would be it. Those are my three big concerns. I am not super concerned about any other position on the field. Now, some of those are pretty big positions, right? You don't have an offensive line, and yeah, I'm whispering. You don't have an offensive line, and you don't have a wide receiver. Passing game's not going to work. Just saying. So, yeah, those are concerns, but I feel like it is something just kind of based of what you hear is trending in a positive direction. And I think that could absolutely bode well for this team. So excited to see where it goes. And I think that there's a lot to like. Now, last thing, Michigan, last two things. Number one, Michigan ranked 14th in the US LBM coaches poll. I think that's a little bit better than I anticipated. I thought it was probably going to be more around 17th. So for them to come in at 14th, I think that's great. Like I said earlier at the top of the show, only one ranked team on the schedule. And again, like for all of this row type talk, I know Oklahoma was the first one out at 26, basically. But like we'll talk about like, oh, Michigan's going to lose that game. I mean, we just know that, when Michigan and Oklahoma get together, which they've done all of once in history, you just know who's going to win that game. I understand it's in Norman, and that's a tough place to play. Like, Ann Arbor's a tough place to play, generally, like a lot of times when people Michigan wasn't that good, they still just generally didn't lose at home unless it was to Michigan State or Ohio State, except for 2020 and last year. So, but Oklahoma was 6 and 7 this year. Let's just get real here. Well, Brent Venables is fighting for his job. Okay. There's a reason why he's fighting for his job. It's not because he's winning games. Okay. But otherwise, lots of road games. And so the big thing for Michigan is, can it play on the road? That's the question more so than anything. But 14th, Ohio State number 2. They got a little bit of a tougher draw because they got number 1 Texas, they've got number 3 Penn State, and they've got number 12 Illinois on that schedule. So that it's a little bit tougher of a schedule for them. And for Michigan, it's tough with the road thing, and that was one of the things that like Wink Martindale talked about over the weekend is that's they generally have back-to-back home games. They don't have that this year. So they've got to get used to being able to do some certain things like that. Last thing, Michigan's got 2 guys on the athletics freaks list, both of the Germans. The Germans always end up on the freaks list for Michigan because Julius Welchkoff was on it a couple times. So that's interesting. Marlon Klein, man, just show it. He was okay last year. Now's the time to show it because he's been talked about as being that super athletic guy. And then, outside of that, it's Manuel Beagle, who it'll be interesting to see more so next year than this year if he can crack in that rotation, because there's to get someone like that according to Justin Tress, moves like a linebacker despite being a 300-pounder. That is very tantalizing, but there is so much there. I don't expect him anytime soon. All right, I cut this short. We're speeding on a little bit just because I'm looking at the audio, not necessarily looking right, and that scares me. We'll get that fixed eventually. I've been researching it, and for whatever reason, it's been a problem with Adobe Audition. So, which is how I record the show audio. So if I can't fix it, we'll do it all on camera, and then we won't have to worry about that, although the audio quality will go down at least a little bit. All right, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Talk to you again soon. Peace.